I grew up in southern Ohio, in a quiet little town where Christmas wasn't just celebrated, it was practically worshipped. Every house on our street had lights, blow-up Santas, reindeer, even singing decorations. Ours was no different, except for something my family never talked about: the basement. We had lived in that house for years, but we almost never went down there. It wasn't flooded or moldy or anything strange like that. It was actually pretty clean and organized. But the reason we avoided it was something old, something my grandparents left behind. A fully decorated artificial Christmas tree that no one remembered buying. My parents told me it had always been there. The thing was tall, taller than any Christmas tree I'd ever seen. Old ornaments, flickering yellow lights, and a star that never worked but somehow still glowed faintly. No one plugged it in, but every December it lit up. If you went down there in July, the tree was dark. But on December 1st, without anyone touching anything, it would glow like someone turned it on. Growing up, it creeped me out, and every Christmas I tried to ignore it. But last year, I couldn't. My parents were going to Florida for a week, leaving me alone at the house right before the holidays. I wasn't scared. I was 17. I could handle being alone. But I'd be lying if I said the idea of being in the house with that basement tree didn't bother me a little. The first night alone was fine. I played games, ate pizza, stayed up stupid late. Around 2:30 a.m., I went downstairs to get a soda from the kitchen and saw a light out of the basement door. Not normal random house light, but warm, flickering glow. The same glow that came from the tree. I froze. Not because the tree was lit, that happened every December, but because I hadn't noticed it on earlier. It was like it had just turned on. I stood there staring at the bottom of the door, wondering if I should open it just to take a look. Just confirm nothing was wrong. Just settle my nerves. But I ignored it, grabbed my soda, went back upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and wrapped myself in a blanket until I fell asleep. The second night was different. Around 1 a.m., I heard something, footsteps from the basement. Slow, dragging footsteps. Not my imagination. I paused my game and listened. Thump. Thump. I muted the TV. Thump. Thump. It sounded like someone walking around the tree. I stood up and leaned into the hallway. The house was dead quiet. No wind, no creaks, nothing. But the footsteps kept going. My heart was pounding. I started telling myself reasonable explanations. Pipes expanding. House settling. You're tired and hearing things. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Ornaments clicking together, like someone brushing past the tree. I didn't sleep that night. By the third night, I was honestly shaken enough to consider calling my parents. Around midnight, I noticed something else. The basement door was slightly open. No one had gone down there. I hadn't touched it. And the thing about that door was it had a sticky frame. You had to pull it hard to open or close it. But there it was. Open. Just an inch, but open. I slowly walked toward it, feeling that horrible, anxious tightening in my stomach. The glow from beneath was stronger than before. And then, I heard breathing. I swear on everything. I heard slow breathing from the darkness behind the door. I stumbled backward so fast I tripped on the hallway rug. My heart was pounding in my ears. I didn't sleep again. I just sat in bed staring at the hallway until the sun came up. By morning, I convinced myself I had imagined it, or at least tried to. When it was daylight, everything felt less scary. I decided I'd go downstairs and look at the basement from the top of the steps. Just a peek. Just enough to quiet the panic. I opened the basement door. The tree was there, glowing quiet still. But something was different. There was something at the base of the tree, wrapped like a present, small enough to fit in one hand. There hadn't been anything there before. I backed away and shut the door. I never opened it again that day. This night was the worst. Something woke me up. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Talking. Whispering. Coming from the basement vent near my bed. I froze and listened. It was impossible to tell what the voice was saying, but it was definitely whispering, soft and hushed, like trying to lure someone closer. I moved my bed away from the vent. At around 3 a.m., I heard something else. The basement stairs. Creaking. Someone was coming up. I held my breath. The footsteps came up slowly. One step at a time. Closer. Closer. Then they stopped right at the basement door. Silence. I stared at my bedroom hallway, waiting for the inevitable. The doorknob turned. I heard it clearly. Something tried opening the basement door, but the door frame was sticky and couldn't be pulled open quietly. The thing tried again. Again. The knob jiggled violently. I want to scream. Then silence. I sat wide awake until sunrise. On the fifth and last night before my parents returned, I finally snapped. I had to know what was happening. I had to see the tree. I grabbed a flashlight, turned every light on, and opened the basement door. No glow. The tree was off completely. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I noticed something horrifying. The present that had been under the tree was gone. Something had taken it. That was enough for me. I bolted back up the stairs, slammed the door, and wedged a kitchen chair into the knob. At around 4 a.m., the whispering began again. But louder this time. It wasn't talking. It was laughing. Slow, soft, low chuckles coming from the vent like something was enjoying my fear. Then my phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. It said, "I like the gift you left me." I swear my blood turned to ice. I blocked the number, threw my phone across the bed, and waited for morning. When my parents came home, I told them everything. I expected them to laugh or brush it off or tell me I'd been overeating pizza and scare myself. Instead, my mom looked pale. She said, "We never decorated that tree. Your grandparents did. And the year your grandfather passed away, on Christmas Eve, that tree turned off. But every December after, it turned on again. We don't talk about it because your grandfather believed something lived in it." I told them about the present. My dad went down to look the same day. There was nothing under the tree. But when he unplugged the lights and we tried to move the tree, we found something taped to the back trunk. A small, folded piece of paper. Worn. Yellow. Old. It said, "Do not open until Christmas Eve." We didn't. The next year, we burned the tree in a fire pit outside. But when the flames consumed it, every bulb lit up one last time. And I swear, we heard someone laughing in the smoke. I live in a small town in northern Colorado, the kind of place that gets so much snowfall that Christmas feels like it lasts the entire winter. This happened when I was 19, and it's still the most terrified I've ever been on Christmas Eve. My parents had gone to visit my aunt in Denver, and because I had work the next morning, I stayed home alone. We lived in a quiet one-story house near the woods. The neighborhood was safe, the kind of place where cars didn't even lock their doors. That night, the snow was coming down thick, covering everything in white. I remember sitting on the couch with a mug of hot chocolate, the Christmas tree lit up beside me, and a movie playing softly in the background. It was sometime around 11 p.m. that I first noticed something strange. The house shook slightly, like someone slammed into the side of it. I paused the movie and waited a second. Nothing. I told myself maybe it was snow sliding off the roof. That happens sometimes. But a few minutes later, there was a sound that definitely wasn't snow. 3 distinct knocks on the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate, spaced out. We weren't expecting anyone. And no one in our neighborhood was awake at this hour. I thought maybe my parents came home early and forgot their key, so I called out, "Mom? Dad?" Dead silence. Another knock. I stood up and walked toward the door, cautiously. There was no peephole, so I had to look through the side window. At first I thought nobody was there, until I saw it. A man stood almost completely covered by heavy snow. I could only see part of his face, pale and freezing. His jacket was soaked. His shoes were probably ruins. He wasn't even shivering, which was weird. He just stood completely still. He didn't look like a neighbor. Too tall. Too out of place. I knocked on the glass a little. "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't turn his head. His eyes were fixed on the door handle, like he wasn't there for help, but to get inside. I froze. Something about him didn't feel right. Then in a low, shaky voice, I said through the window, "Do you need me to call someone? Like an ambulance?" He didn't respond. He didn't move. Then, with terrifying slowness, he raised his hand and knocked again. Knock, knock, knock. Exactly the same way as before. I backed away from the door. Every instinct in my body screamed, "Do not open it." I went to the kitchen and grabbed my phone to call police. Before I even finished dialing, I heard sound number 2, a scraping sound coming from the side of the house. It was like someone dragging something metallic across the siding. But I never heard footsteps in the snow. That was impossible. The snow was so deep, you couldn't walk quietly. But there was no crunch of snow at all. I peeked through another window, facing the yard. The man was gone. There were no footprints in the snow where he had been. Not one. My breath caught in my throat. It was like he had just appeared out of nowhere and disappeared. I locked the deadbolt and turned on all the lights in the house. I was on the phone with the police when it got worse. Someone began knocking at the back door. Same pattern. Knock, knock, knock. The dispatcher asked me if someone was inside, and I replied in a shaky whisper. He moved to the back of the house. I didn't see him walk. He didn't leave footprints. She told me officers were on the way and to stay inside. The knocking stopped. Then came the scraping again, like something dragging across the walls. I swear the entire house was shaking. I grabbed the fireplace poker and stood beside the hall. Then silence. Complete silence. 10 minutes felt like an hour. The police had still not arrived. I thought maybe he left, but then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Someone whispered through the vents. "Let me in, please, it's Christmas." The voice was soft, trembling, almost like the words were forced out. I screamed and backed away from the wall. There was definitely no one in the house, but somehow he was speaking from the vents like he was beneath the house or inside the walls. The dispatcher kept telling me to breathe, that help was close. Then, suddenly, the lights went out. I dropped the phone. Darkness swallowed the room. I turned to run toward my room, but I slipped and hit the floor hard. Then I saw it glow, greenish-white glow seeping under the basement door. But we didn't have Christmas lights down there. We hadn't been in that basement in months. There was a voice behind the door. Not knocking this time, just breathing. Loud, raspy, breathing inches from the wood. I crawled backward, not daring to get near it. As I backed away, I reached the hallway and locked myself inside my bedroom. I pushed my dresser against the door and crouched with the poker in one hand and my phone in the other. The whispering started again, clearer now. "Please, I'm cold, let me in." It wasn't begging. It was mocking, like something trying to sound human, but failing. I stayed like that for maybe 15 minutes. Then the sirens finally arrived. Red and blue lights flashing against my wall through the window. I heard voices yelling, footsteps crunching snow. Then officers pounding on the front door. I opened my window and screamed for help. They broke in and searched the house immediately. Nobody was inside. No signs of forced entry. Nothing disturbed. Except for one thing. Outside, on the back door, carved into the wood, was a message written perfectly straight, with something sharp. "Let me in." The police asked if I had any enemies or if I knew someone who would do this. I said no. They searched outside the home. There were no footprints, not a single one, and the snow was untouched, smooth like fresh icing on a cake. No tracks, no drag marks, no sign of the man ever being there. The officers left around 3 a.m., and the power finally came back on. The house was silent again, but I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch with every light on. Around 5 a.m., just before sunrise, I heard it one last time. Somewhere far in the woods behind my house. Knock, knock, knock. 3 perfect knocks. Like he was still waiting. Waiting for next Christmas. This happened 3 Christmases ago, when I was 16 and living with my mom in Minnesota. We were spending Christmas alone that year because my dad had passed away the previous spring, and it was still fresh enough that we didn't want parties or family visits. We just wanted peace. We lived in a small house that faced a frozen lake. In winter, everything turned white. Snowbanks piled higher than the mailbox, trees covered like ghosts, and wind chills that went down to the negatives. But the view of the lake was nice, especially at night when the moon lit it up. It was Christmas Eve, and I was lying on the couch watching old home videos of past Christmases with my dad. It felt comforting in a strange way, like he was still here. My mom had gone to bed early, and I decided to stay up a little longer. I must have fallen asleep sometime after midnight. I woke up to the wind howling. That's not unusual here. Windstorms are common. But what was unusual was hearing scraping noises outside, like someone was dragging something across the frozen ground under my window. At first, I pulled the blanket over my head, thinking it was just a tree branch. But there are no trees close enough to hit the house. The scraping went on for 5 minutes straight. Slow, dragging, like something heavy being pushed. Curiosity got the best of me. I lifted the blinds just an inch, and I froze. There was a huge snowman sitting directly in front of my window. When I say directly, I mean its head was inches from the glass. It was staring at me, facing the window like someone built it intentionally for me. The weirdest part? There had been no snowman there earlier. Not yesterday. Not the entire month. The snow was fresh. No footprints. No tracks. Nothing disturbed. I closed the blinds and backed away. My heart was pounding. There was no reason for someone to build a snowman that close to our house. Especially at midnight. Especially staring into my window. I tried waking my mom, but she didn't answer when I whispered. I didn't want to scream and scare her, so I went into my room and locked the door. I stayed awake for an hour, listening carefully. Silence. I eventually drifted asleep sometime near dawn. The next morning, I thought maybe I dreamed it. So I walked outside onto the porch. And there it was. The snowman was real. Big. About 6 feet tall. The arms weren't sticks. They were just long frozen snow limbs shaped unnaturally straight. And the face wasn't made of coal or carrots. It was just carved into the snow like deep gouges, giving it this horrifying, expressionless look. Its body wasn't round. More like a misshapen chunk of ice and snow, like someone built it in a rush. My mom came outside and saw it too. She thought local teens were messing around. But I knew this wasn't some harmless prank. Not when there were 0 footprints around it. The snow around was perfectly smooth. Mom pushed the snowman over. It collapsed into a heap. I helped her shovel the remains to the side of the house. She shrugged it off, told me not to worry. I tried. But that night, worry came knocking. Or more accurately, scraping. At around 1:30 a.m., I bolted awake to the exact same dragging sound outside. I sat up slowly, heart hammering. The scraping stopped. The window glowed faintly from reflected moonlight. I didn't want to look, but I did. The blinds were halfway up now. I never left them that way. And the snowman was back. This time its face was much closer to the window, pressed against the glass. Its gouged eyes staring directly at my bed. I jumped out and slammed my bedroom door shut. I ran to my mom's room and shook her awake. She got irritated at first, until I dragged her to my room and pointed to the window. She gasped. This wasn't a prank now. We both rushed outside, angry and scared. But when we got to the yard, there was no snowman, just smooth snow, like nothing had ever stood there. But when we checked the window, there were 2 wet marks where something frozen had leaned against it. My mom called the police. 2 officers came, walked through the yard, inspected around the house. They found nothing. They basically told us that if someone wanted to mess with us, they would have left footprints, so it must have been some snow collapsing weirdly, or that we were imagining more than we saw. I felt stupid, but I wasn't imagining it. I knew I wasn't. The next night, Christmas night, is when things escalated to a nightmare I still cannot explain. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I woke up, not to scraping, but to the sound of breathing. A slow, icy, raspy breath, like someone frozen and struggling to inhale. It was coming from the window. I lay still for several seconds, trying to convince myself I was dreaming. Then I heard something else. The distinct crackling sound of ice shifting. Something was moving outside the glass. I reached for my phone flashlight and held it up, but I didn't dare point at the window. Instead, I looked down at the floor. There was melted water. 3 wet spots forming a trail from my window to the foot of my bed. No footsteps, just melt puddles, as if someone dripping with ice had stood there. I was petrified. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe. Then suddenly, thump! The window shook like something slammed against it. I screamed and ran to my mom's room again. She bolted upright, and before I could explain, the thumping started again. But this time we heard something worse. A voice. Low, broken, frozen, cold, like someone dying of frostbite. My mom grabbed her phone and called 911 again. The dispatcher heard the noise and sent officers immediately. But before they arrived, everything went quiet, until we heard it, from right outside the front door. Cold, like something dragging frozen limbs across the porch. My mom and I locked ourselves in the bathroom and waited. 15 eternal minutes later, the police burst in, searching with flashlights, shouting for us. We came out shaking. The officers searched the property and found something chilling. Behind the house, near my window, was a human-shaped impression in the snow. Not a snowman, like a person had been lying there. The officers had no explanation. They took photos. They questioned neighbors. Nobody saw anything. Nobody was awake. There were no tracks leading to or from the imprint. Just that eerie body shape pressed into the snow like a frozen corpse had rested there. We stayed at a hotel for 2 nights after. When we returned home, I refused to sleep in my room. I stayed on the couch every night until winter ended. Every year since then, when Christmas approaches, I sleep with my blinds closed tight. On the first snowfall of the season, I check the yard again and again, just to be sure, to make sure there's no snowman staring in. But last week, I stepped outside at 3 a.m. to grab something from the car. And across the lake, illuminated faintly by the moon, I saw something tall, white, humanoid, not moving, not blowing with the wind, just standing motionless and facing our direction. And I swear to this day, even from that distance, it looked exactly like a snowman.